I'd like to invite another friend of the Jayanti Foundation, who is an active GP in our National Health Service, but also a poet. So, Dr. Rachna Chawla, I'd like to invite you to come and share some of your poetry or a poem you've chosen with us, please.
The poem I've chosen today is by someone called Mary Oliver, and the reason I chose the poem is because it talks a lot about curiosity and amazement, but it reminded me of my friend Charlotte, who she died in 2005. She was at medical school with me, and she was really different to the rest of us. She would live in this wondrous state, always curious, and one of my friends told me after she died that when a patient was admitted to her ward, this lady who couldn't see, she especially would buy bright clothes and bright shoes so that this lady would see her coming up to her, because otherwise she didn't know that it was Charlotte. So when Charlotte passed away, it's only then that we found out that she had had this childhood cancer that had recurred in her adult life. She's only 26. But her death was really a reminder to us all of how to live, but also how to die. So this poem is for Charlotte, and it's by Mary Oliver, and it's called When Death Comes. When death comes, like the hungry bear in autumn, when death comes and takes all the bright coins from his purse to buy me, and snaps the purse shut, when death comes like the chicken pox, when death comes like an iceberg between the shoulder blades, I want to step through the door full of curiosity, wondering, what is it going to be like, that cottage of darkness? And therefore, I look upon everything as a brotherhood and a sisterhood. I look upon time as no more than an idea, and I consider eternity as another possibility. And I think of each life as a flower, as common as a field daisy, and as singular. And each name a comfortable music in the mouth, tending, as all music does, towards silence. And each body a lion of courage, and something precious to the earth. When it's over, I want to say, all my life I was a bride, married to amazement. I was a bridegroom, taking the world into my arms. When it's over, I don't want to wonder if I've made of my life something particular and real. I don't want to find myself sighing and frightened or full of argument. I don't want to end up simply having visited this world. Thank you.
Anne Yeomans is someone who's led a very full life already, done lots of things, was a teacher and worked in equality in education, and trained as a craniosacral therapist, and then more latterly has really become interested in being a companion on the journey of those who are dying. And so Anne, we're very, very grateful and pleased to have Anne with us today. She's trained as a soul midwife with Felicity Warner's organisation, which I think you may have heard about, Soul Midwives. But I think even before that, in fact, most of her life, Anne has had a real sense of the spiritual. And so she feels all those aspects of her life have now come together in this role of being a companion. And she's going to share with us the thoughts about the role of a friend, care, compassion and companionship for those who are dying. So, thank you, Anne.
Thank you,
Over
Sarah.
to you.
Thank you very much. Yes, when I first saw the title of today's event, Shining Light on Death, everything in me said yes. Death may be seen as failure, loss, suffering, the end, annihilation. And don't misunderstand me, tragic, untimely death is hard to bear. But today I'm going to address the advance of frailty as a natural process of aging and approach it in the light of death as empowerment, as merciful, even as choice. which may sound strange, but who of us in this room would really want to live forever? As in nature, and we are a part of nature in this body, we are born, we mature, and we die. And as we age, we do begin to feel the wisdom and the rightness of that. My teacher, Roshi, used to say that as we lose physical strength, other dimensions of strength open up and are available to us. And I was delighted that in Peter's talk, he said very much the same thing, didn't you, Peter? Yeah. So I want to talk about the approach of the soul midwife to death and dying, but remembering that everyone in this room has the experience and the qualities to befriend the dying, or you wouldn't be sitting here today. So our role is above all else to be a friend to the one in transition, who we refer to as friend, capital F, and to be there available for those who love them, to be with that person as they do their own inevitable work in finding that place of peace within from which it feels safe to leave. We have no agenda. Our role is not medical, although some of us are medics and therapists. We serve as a friend, and we offer whatever help is needed at the time. Now, that may be very practical help, sitting with the person in transition, keeping them comfortable, or being a sounding board for their thoughts and feelings. The challenge for the dying may be embracing deep grief and loss and confronting the deep wounds of their life, which have now become inescapable. And again, one of Peter's slides referred to that you can go on in denial for so long, but in fact, as you approach death, it's as if they come up to meet you. And so we serve best, we believe, by embracing our own deep soul wounds. And that enables us to stay fully grounded, blended, and open to the needs of friend. And that may be a relative, that may be a patient, that may be a neighbor. And I'm going to talk now and show you things. This is also going to be a practical session. I'm going to talk now about care, compassion, and companionship. I'm going to introduce the table first, though, because we believe that as the natural process of aging and frailty move along, we perceive that as the gradual withdrawal of the elements. So we see that as earth, water, fire, and air. And that doesn't mean that they're split into sections. Of course they're not. Because the withdrawal of the earth element often occurs when grandma falls and breaks her hip, right? And you perceive that her bones are not what they used to do. She doesn't recover as fast as she used to do, and so on. And that, for us, is the beginning of the earth elemental withdrawal. And that's about physical vulnerability. Now, Felicity says it takes, during the natural process of frailty and aging, it takes about 8 to 10 years to die. Some people it will take less. Some people, of course, it will take longer. So I'm not at this stage talking about people who have a very serious diagnosis, say, of cancer, and then die sooner than that. Although they do tend to follow the same pattern of the withdrawal of the elements. So, loss of appetite can occur when the earth physical vulnerability begins. There may be broken bones. The person may feel that they don't want to go out so much, and certainly not in the snow because I might fall over. There may be a great desire for comfort food. Normally, the sense of smell may change. And the colour for that withdrawal of the earth element is, Felicity has worked long and hard on this. They seem to be drawn to the colour green as a comfort. And so we all, as soul midwives, have green blankets, green shawls, and so on, so that it's appropriate for the different stage that a person is at. And we use oils like patchouli, cedar, touch therapies like craniosacral therapy, Reiki, hand massage, gentle massage. They love to be touched, people at this stage. And favourite films. You know, Dad's Army. What's the other one? Foyle's War. You know, over and over I find that my aunts and my elderly relatives, they've loved watching those films over and over again. Because they are moving back into a time that was very, very important to them, and which may, as they move towards the transition, actually become more important and more real than the present day. So, favourite films, favourite music, we use all of these things. Palm stones, like these, are very popular to hold in the hand. When my oldest friend was dying 2 years ago, she adored the beaches of Dorset. And I love Lyme Regis too. So I went to Lyme Regis and very naughtily removed one of the pebbles from the beach. It's actually illegal. And took it to her, placed it in her hand as she was weakening, and said, "There, that's from Lyme Regis." And she held it. So you can do things like that. And that really is the role of the soul midwife, to bring that comfort and to be in the person's reality with them and care for them like that. Bells. This one, I'll ring it again. They're lovely at that stage. I expect many of you know about chime bars. And if you are a healer, it's very useful to use a chime bar to see where the block is. Can you hear the change? As it was around here, my solar plexus, probably because I've got to do something today which is a little bit out of the ordinary. So we use these things. We use batch flower remedies. I'm a registered batch flower therapist, but anybody can use rescue remedy. And within rescue remedy, rock rose for extreme terror is very useful. Star of Bethlehem for extreme grief. And aspen for the... aspen is when the sensitivity is overwhelming and they just need a little bit of protection from that sensitivity. You know, in a busy hospital ward, or too many visitors have come at once, that kind of situation. And then the other things that we use are the sacred oils. Now, Felicity makes these. They're absolutely beautiful. They're very ancient. And during the lunch hour, you can all come up and have a look at the table and see what I've got here. One of our favourite sacred oils is spikenard, one of the ancient Magdalene oils. I will console you and lead you across to be with those that you have loved. I will show you how it is to be in spirit. I open a space in your heart to reach across the sacred threshold. And spikenard has come back now and has become much more in tune with the world that we live in now. But until quite recently, we used Fregonia mostly. Fregonia, the oil of choice for soul midwives. Balance, warmth, sunshine. The colour is turquoise. It's the vibration for today's life. And it's an Australian relative of the myrtle tree. And the myrtle tree is the tree of the gateway, which is rather beautiful. It's for friend and for oneself. And it says, call on me when exhausted. So there's Ravensara, which is Maori bush medicine, which releases painful soul wounds that are hurting, abandonment, bullying, any issue of abuse. Frankincense sets the spirit free, breaks the past, breaks the vibrations of the past so people can move on. And the other one that's my very favourite is Elemi. It's thousands of years old. It was kept secret. It connects heaven and earth and moves people on. Luminously tender, it can be used with a child or the very old. So if people are finding it difficult just to move on, again, Elemi is a great blessing. Elemi. Now, you have reminded me, thank you very much. I have handouts here for everybody. You don't really need to take many notes at all. What you are invited to do at the end is take a yellow one and a purple one, and I'll put them on the stage so that they're easy to come up and look at. And in the purple one, I've summarized the 4 stages of dying and the elemental withdrawal. And I've also got full instructions for the clear light meditation that we're going to do later on. In this one, there are notes from the chapter I wrote in the book, The Inner Power of Stillness, about stillness and solace for the dying. And because the book is so heavy, I wasn't able to bring it, but I've taken my favorite extracts out of that, and it's on the yellow sheet. All right? All the references of the books that I refer to are on the back, including the websites of Soul Midwives and William Bloom, who is another dear friend who does a lot of work and workshops on being with the dying. So there we are. So we've looked at earth. The next element to come to the surface in order to withdraw is water. And we use the blue, the lovely blue blankets. This one, I love this shawl. It was handmade on Iona, so it's specially precious. And it's got the beginnings of pink and red in it, which is the next stage, which is fire. And then the last stage, which is the withdrawal of air, we usually think of as yellow. So the water elemental withdrawal. Oh, lots of water music here. This is when people can become emotionally vulnerable, tearful, loss of control over body fluids. They express emotions and the need for female relationships and love. They may have a dry mouth at this stage and hearing loss, because while the sense of smell we generally associate with the earth withdrawal, it's hearing that is generally associated with the water withdrawal. And it's at this stage that the soul wounds come to the surface, things that they've not been able to deal with. And I always like at this stage to remind everyone that the people in our care homes now are Well, it's 1918. If they're 80, they were born in 1938. What does that mean to you? Their childhoods and their teenage years were in the Second World War. And many of them lost parents. They had to be evacuated. And these things, you know, we submerge very successfully, especially when we're pre-verbal, up to about 2 years old. We can stuff them down. But actually, as death approaches, they come up. They say, look, remember me? And they want to be embraced and healed, if possible. And so someone at the water stage, and of course the earth stage is still going along underneath, so you don't stop earth to have water. The earth stage is continuing. The physical vulnerability is probably still continuing underneath. And so they may dream of water, rivers, oceans, sea creatures. And it's here they're really beginning to come to terms with the end of life. That they're beginning to realize that they're not actually going to get back to the health and strength they used to have. And it's at this stage that, you know, they sign over their power of attorney for their health or for their finances. And it can be a terrible sense of loss, just as Peter was saying, exactly like that they have to give up everything, even their power over their own finances. If they're wise, they do, if they're wise. So therapeutic techniques, here we would be using the Star of Bethlehem for deep grief. We would be looking at musical instruments with a very gentle resonance, blue blankets and shawls. And here I'm always reminded that the Amerindian people, for them, the emblem of a shawl is going home. Isn't that lovely? So, you know, buy Grandma a nice blue shawl when her eyes are running and she's not able to control it. And that will be very, very comforting because she is going home. Lovely. So then we get to fire. Now, this can be difficult for family members. Very difficult for the family members who care for maybe parents, maybe aunts, grandparents. Because it's at this stage that the fire element begins to withdraw and it comes out. And you'll often get quite irrational irritation, anger, you know. This is the time of agitation. Belligerents may be plucking at the air. They may refuse sustenance. And this stage usually heralds the actual process of dying. They are transitioning at this point. I like to think of their soul practicing to die as transitioning. And of course, they do see those on the other side coming to meet them. One of my relatives would not believe that her husband had died 25 years ago because as far as she was concerned, he was there with her. And she said to me once, she said, when did he die? I said, 25 years ago. No, stupid, no. And of course, I was thrilled. I was in my heart so delighted because it meant that he'd come for her. I knew what was happening. He'd come for her. So in the fire elemental withdrawal, it's the eyes. It's the eyes, which is the sense which very much changes. So it's important when you're talking to someone in the fire stage to go to the end of the bed, because their vision is becoming more foveal. It's tunnel vision. And if you approach them from the side, They may not know who you are or what you want or what's going on. So we approach from the end of the bed to ask any questions like, do they want some water? What do they want to eat for their tea or whatever? So it's very important, and it's very hard for relatives not to take anything personally, accept the patient's reality. Moistening the lips will help. Pineapple juice mixed with water is a wonderful, refreshing thing at this stage. Oils such as our myrrh and frankincense and jasmine. Deep pink blankets and shawls. And then, of course, finally, the air elemental withdrawal. Gradual loss of consciousness, or consciousness in relation to us. They have their own consciousness, of course. But they may seem unconscious to us or sleeping. They're less interested in reality. And I do believe that those who are very close to death, they do turn their face to the wall, physically and metaphorically. And they may not want to be touched at this stage. They don't want any gentle therapy. And what we usually recommend is that we withdraw all stimulus. Maybe birdsong. I've got my little birdsong CD there. Birdsong or flute music. But really, we are withdrawing so they can go. And many people have told the story how they wanted to be with their mother while she was dying. And they went to get a cup of coffee and came back, and she died, and they're devastated. And we don't need to be, because she knew what she was doing, and that was when she wanted to go. So, I also just want to say I think this natural process can be disrupted by dementia and severe memory loss. And this is where it's your relative, and it's so hard. Because I have had 2 relatives die who were severely suffering from dementia. And it was as if they couldn't quite find the pathway to that place inside where they could be still enough to actually leave. And Felicity disagrees with this. She says she thinks some people go faster when they're suffering from dementia. That's not been my experience. And so this again is something to remember about the generation that are in our care homes now. These are the people I'm talking about. And it can be very hard. Because, they're lying, maybe in hospital, maybe in a nursing home, and they're dying, and they're agitated and asking you, when am I going home? And I haven't got any keys, and how am I going to get in? And I'm going to have to call the police to get back home. The concept of dying is not there with them. That's my experience. So it's something to just give extra love to. Okay. And of course, that's their soul's plan. That's not my plan. That's their soul's plan. And so we just go on loving and doing what we can. So that was sort of practical care. Now I'm just going to look at compassion. And I think there are 5 vital ingredients that illustrate compassion. Whole body listening, and I mean we could be here for 2 days talking about listening skills, which we can't. So I'm going to just stick with whole body listening. That's posture, ears, eyes, and heart. And then there's appropriate touch. We're going to do a little exercise on that if you're willing. I invite you to anyway. And then there's therapeutic presence, which we can do for anyone. But when people are dying, we usually call it vigiling. And I have an exercise that we can do together in a minute on that. And don't worry if you can't remember what I've said, it's here, okay? And it's something you can do with anyone who's sick, but particularly people who are dying, whether they're conscious or not conscious or sleeping or whatever. Okay, so whole body listening. I'm just going to read what my beloved meditation teacher wrote. To really be with other people is a matter of letting quietness pervade. Through quietening, we become really sensitive and can be with that person. And as a natural and intuitive response to our quietness, they feel freer and more able to be open. This is listening with the heart, without judgment or mental interference, and letting our responses come from the quietness. Then we notice with our eyes any physical non-verbal response from our friend, and we hear what is not being said. So I leave that with you. You're all very experienced in listening skills, I know. Now the other one is appropriate touch. Now I was a craniosacral therapist for 20 years, and so touch is really, really important to me. And we always say in craniosacral therapy that the pressure should only be the weight of a 20p piece. But if you haven't got a 20p piece, I can tell you that the best way to match touch with the dying, because of course they are very sensitive to touch, and they may not want you to touch them at all. So you have to ask permission. But the one way to sort of test your sense of touch is appropriate is to take your fingertips, close your eyes, and just place your fingertips on your eyes. And I just invite you to do that. And you can keep it very light so that it's feathery, or you can press too hard. And you know you don't want to go on doing it at that pressure. So just ease up and just let your fingertips rest on your eyes at a pressure that's comfortable and comforting. Are you there? That is the way to approach a dying person, because you don't want to press too hard, but you don't necessarily want to leave them not knowing that you're there. But if you've asked permission to touch them and they've given you their hand or their arm, then that's the way to do it. And you will know, you will feel them responding, matching your touch, and that's perfect for them. Because it is very sacred, as we all know, to touch the dying. And so if you do it like that, you can do no wrong. And everyone's matching pressure may be different, but you'll know what you're looking for. Another lovely form of touch we do is the stroking. And if you just want to stroke one of your arms with your other hand, you just get the feel. This is a feathery touch. And some people prefer this when they're very ill. They prefer this to actually being held. Other people may grasp your hand and not want to let you go. So you just stay with that. You let them grasp until gradually they feel calmer and they let you go. So it's entirely unconditional, touching the dying. You know, when we give someone a hug, we're a bit disappointed if we don't get a hug back. But in this instance, then just to give and not expect. This sort of work doesn't have any job satisfaction. It's not meant to have a lot of job satisfaction in the sense that you go into it for job satisfaction. It is entirely unconditional and loving. All right. Now, if the person doesn't want to be touched, and you're sitting with them, and maybe they're in a coma, maybe they're sleeping, maybe they're, from your perception, in and out of consciousness. And you know they don't want to be touched because they pulled their hand away or they didn't respond when you asked. And sometimes when they become conscious that you're there, they may turn their face away. So then you don't touch, but you can go on vigiling. You can go on. Because this is a visual form of prayer, which I love. And I think that it's okay to do it, whether the person knows or not. Because most of us, when we pray, we don't go and ask permission of people, do we? We pray, you know. The Thai football team in the cave, how many of us weren't on our knees or lighting candles for them? But we couldn't ask their permission. So I see this in a similar way. And it's called the Clear Light Meditation. And it's mentioned by Rinpoche in the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying, which I utterly adore, by the way. I know it's written from a Buddhist perspective in a sense, in terms of talking about the bardo and so on. But it's bedtime story reading. It's wonderful, all about his relationship with his guru and how, you know, he became so interested in this work. So he mentions it. I was doing it for years, and then intuitively, didn't know it had a name, and then went to a William Bloom workshop, and he did it. And bless him, he put a diagram on the board. And isn't that easier when you put a diagram on the board? So that's what you've got on the purple sheet. You've really got an adaptation of William's diagram. And would you like to do it with me now? Would you like to try it? What I'd like you to do is think of someone. We're not by their bedside, and that may not even be possible. They may not even be in bed, but somebody that you know would really benefit from some nurturing time at the moment, being nurtured. And they may be in prison, they may be in a care home, they may be in a hospice, they may be in rehab. Wherever they are, you know who they are. And so what we do is this. In fact, I'll sit, because then I'll be sitting like you're sitting. So sit comfortably so that your sitting bones are balanced. Feet on the floor. And then take your attention to way above your head into the cosmos, to what Rinpoche calls the clear light. Now, this will be different for everybody. But connect to that clear light, whatever that is for you. And feel its strength, its spirituality, its blessings coming down upon you. And then think of your friend or your relative and see them either at your side or in front of you. And just in your imagination, gently pull them in to be with you in the clear light. And then when they're in the clear light with you, connect themselves directly to the point of the clear light. So you and they are in a cone of clear light. And we'll stay like this for 1 minute. And then very slowly begin to withdraw from the cone, but keeping them in it. And as you withdraw, you come back to your own living life, conscious of your sitting bones on the seat and your feet on the floor. And take a few breaths. And just leave them in the clear light with a prayer that that light will stay with them for as long as they need it. And then when you're ready, open your eyes. Now, if you are at the bedside of a person who is very sick or dying, so easy to do. And I tell you what it does. Vigiling can be very, it's not boring, that's the wrong word, but it's quite difficult to maintain full consciousness on that without other thoughts and your own worries coming in or whatever. And I find this clear light meditation really helps me to focus in on the person. And you will go off and you'll be writing your Tesco list or whatever it is, or worrying about, Jack who's got himself into a bit of bother. But then with this meditation, you can keep going back. And it's a wonderful way of staying in touch with friend and keeping yourself focused. So, finally, companionship. The ability to be with, to wait, and not to try to fix. Calm presence, allowing the soul to make its own way. And of course, as Peter said, the soul knows its own way. The soul knows how to do it. But sometimes it can be difficult for us watching it. But the soul knows its own way. Dr. Kearney, In a Place of Healing, and the book was so heavy, I just had to bring the cover, right? These are pictures of the Asclepian temple in Pergamon, in Turkey. I went there for a week and pounded the stones. That place is amazing. The ruins are still there of the Asclepian temple. And in the place of healing, Dr. Kearney tells the story of the Greek god Asclepius, who, although he was the natural son of Apollo, he was brought up by his stepfather Chiron. And as we all know, Chiron had an incurable wound that would never heal. And he taught Asclepius about suffering and how to be with those who would never get well. And Dr. Kearney likens the heroic Apollo with the radical medical model, which is concerned around relieving pain mostly. Whereas the Chiron Asclepian focus is on relieving inner suffering. And he defines suffering as that which is unable to be relieved by medication. So we all work through our suffering on our journey to dying. And he makes this wonderful quote. And if this was a sermon, which I hope it hasn't been, this would have been my text, all right? With healing, who we are as human beings and how we are with the other, in the incurable wound of his or her suffering, is far more important than anything we might do or say. Who we are is more important than anything we might do or say. And really this work is with the soul wounds that tend to surface at the water stage of the elemental withdrawal. These are the wounds where we sit with friend. They're the wounds that come up when we think, oh, well, I've dealt with that. Ever had that? And then another circumstance arises and you realize you haven't quite healed that or forgiven that person or asked for forgiveness or not quite finished. So these soul wounds, they leave a mark. They can't necessarily be resolved. They can only, I think, be embraced and acknowledged. They're the deep angers, resentment, remorse, grief, bitterness, loss of faith. They seep away at our strength. They may be around longing for forgiveness or reconciliation, death of a child, loss of a baby, or grief for one that had to be given away. And remember the generation in our care homes now, to have a baby out of wedlock was an unforgivable sin. And many of our women now in our care homes gave away their babies because they had to. So these are what I mean by the soul wounds. And to really be with friend when they are going through those soul wounds, we really need not to be, pushed off balance by it. And the best way not to be pushed off balance by it is to face and embrace and allow healing of our own soul wounds. So this is not easy. They hurt. They make us go hot. They feel like our fault, that we're a bad person, that we were a terrible mother, we're a fraud, we're hopelessly inept. And the deeper they hurt, of course, the more love they need, the more being with ourselves they need. And the worst ones are often from infancy and early childhood, when we were pre-verbal and did not have the words to express our feelings then. And this is where practices like meditation, mindfulness, grief recovery programs, and dealing with our own chronic and long-term PTSD is so valuable. So we can help ourselves from now not to let the losses of our lives build up, knowing that we are going to die, being honest and truthful with ourselves, streamlining our lives to live meaningfully, being true to our own values. Then we can truly serve others at the time of their dying and gradually develop the gift of being with them more consciously in their suffering. Now, I'd like to end. We have the time for 3-minute meditation? Thank you. I'd like to end with the meditation that I wrote for my friend Thomas long ago. We do this on our Soul Midwifery courses. A meditation which you can just even whisper into the ear of a dying person, especially if you know that they're finding it difficult. One of the saddest things I ever heard was someone that I had been working with a long time, and towards the end of her life, very near the end, she said, "But I don't know how to die." And that smote me. In fact, that's what made me take up the soul midwifery in a much more serious way. And so this is a meditation to help us and friend find that place of peace within, that stillness where we feel safe to go. And this is a very lovely link with what Peter was saying at the end of his talk too. So I invite you to sit on your sitting bones in a nice balanced way. And apply this to yourself. Apply this to yourself. So now, my friends, as you settle gently into your body, just become aware again of your breathing. There is no hurry. You have all the time in the world as we sit here together. The air drifting in and the air drifting out. Gently and peacefully. And as you do so, you are drawn to a beautiful space inside your body. It may be in your heart or in your tummy. And in that space, you know that there is only peace and calm and stillness. And that there you are safe. You are very safe. You are always safe. This is your own special place where you are always safe and connected to the deepest part of your being. Just feel how it feels, so calm and peaceful, restful and still. For this is a magical place where sounds and shapes have a special meaning for you. This is your own inner sanctuary, and you can visit it whenever you like. Here you can be your own true self and connect with that most mystical and spiritual part of your inner being, the part of you which is always light and free and at peace. For that space is timeless and infinite, full of love, unbounded, infinite love. And that love is for you. That love is you. And that love surrounds you. So you can let go into it and feel it, experience it, and know that you are safe.
Thank you so much, Peter. I've really enjoyed both of your talks. And I was wondering what percentage of people die in hospices and what you have to do to make sure that that's where you do end your life as opposed to an intensive care unit.
Peter?
I didn't catch the second half. How many people die in hospices?
And what you have to do to ensure that you would die there instead of an intensive care unit.
And what, Sarah, what do you have to do?
How do you get into a hospice rather than being in an intensive care unit or acute ward?
It's really difficult because the hospice has to have a vacancy. So you have to die at the right time. 50% of people in the UK die in hospitals. And the words coming back from the hospitals is the nurses just don't have time to look after them properly. I mean, they're there to get people out. When I had this operation on my shoulder, I was in for one night. You know, sort of major surgery, bye-bye. And if you want to block a bed for a few weeks while you're dying, that's not good news. So I'm being a bit cynical about that, but in fact the nurses are obviously very good and they do everything they can do, but it's the system which is wrong. And I think what you want to do is, if you've prepared things properly, then you will have gone down to your local hospice and said, I've got a terminal diagnosis, or you can do this through Macmillan, and said, I don't know how long I'm going to live, how can I stay in touch, etc. Quite often, the hospice will have you in for respite care. and just that your carer can have a break. And quite often during that time, then of course you will die. So plan, it's all in the planning.
Yes, I completely agree with Peter. I have worked in a hospital, in a therapy centre, and there we have links within the cancer unit and our therapy centre, the Fountain Centre. We have links with hospices, and so if you're in the Fountain Centre, then because of that link, I think it's easier to get into a hospital.
What about soul midwives? How do you get a soul midwife?
How do you
get a soul midwife?
Well, you ask for one. Yes, yes. It would be a relative in that case, and you would go to www.soulmidwives.co.uk website on the sheet and ask Felicity, and she will direct.
How many soul midwives are there in the UK?
Well, there must be up to 1,000 by now. Must be up to 1,000. And who've done the Soul Midwife 1. And then into the sort of, about 100 have done the Soul Midwife 2, which is about psychopomp work, which isn't relevant here, but that's about guiding. A conductor of souls is a psychopomp, and that's about staying with the person for up to 49 days, which in many cultures is the time it takes to cross the border.
I have visited lots of homes and hospices, and I have seen people dying in pain. Now, I know euthanasia is not allowed in this country. Is there anything a companion can do for people who are dying to die peacefully? Give them something, tell them something, help them with something that would let them go peacefully. I was present when a friend of mine died, and he pointed his eyes to me to look at his wife, and he said to me, look after her when I am gone. That's how I understood it. And I took care of that lady until she died. And I was wondering whether there's anything that anybody can do in such situations.
Yes, thank you. I think that's a really fundamental question. If we change from the ordinary role into the carer's role, what can we do to help the dying? And it's going to be that when they get the diagnosis and they know that they're on the path, or on their final path, then I think the first thing we can do is to make sure they've got everything in place. Have they got their living will in place? Have they got their will in place? Have they got their relationships right with their children? Are they settled in themselves, or do they need help along those lines? When they are in the terminal stages, then being with them, we had a lovely talk from Anne about the sorts of things that you can do. So, quiet, supportive, and loving is what's required. But you see, supposing you're in a busy hospital ward, what do you do then? Well, you can always draw the curtains around the bed, and that gives them a little peace, but it's not ideal. So it's planning beforehand is really what the carer's role is. And one of the people who we know terribly well, just close to us, died 2 weeks ago. And he was in King's, she was in King's, and she'd go to King's, come out, go to King's, come out, go to King's, come out. And finally, they contacted St. Christopher's, who said, yeah, send her here. And that was terribly important because this hadn't been raised by the palliative care team. And what they were expecting is that they would go back into hospital again. So sit beside the bed, be quiet, And in fact, in our pamphlet, that we've got two, one for relatives of the dying, one for carers of the dying, and that gives quite a lot of guidance on what you actually do to help them. But help them plan. It's really what's needed.
I just wanted to comment what Dr. Peter Fenwick is saying is that, we have an opportunity during our lifetime now to make conscious decisions. And there are wonderful charities here in the UK. There's Compassion in Dying. I don't know if you've heard of that. And their mission is to help us to be able to make these choices that we want. And everything really is about in the planning and how we live our lives up to that time of dying. And that is where we will find more peace in our death and in our dying and with our loved ones. And we will find the meaning and value of that time. But it's being conscious that we are going to die and we need to think about, this is why we're having these conversations. And it's in the planning, really. And we can do that, even if we can only talk to our loved ones about what we would want. And then hopefully these people will honour our wishes. And obviously this gentleman who just shared, that's what he was doing. He was honouring this family, this person.
Thank you both, Peter and Anne, very, very much for all your sharings and the work that you do. So let's thank them.